So I am going to tell you my most embarrassing moment from high school. Okay, you ready for that? Just pretend like you are, even if you're not. I got to give a little context first. When I was a sophomore in high school, I was invisible. Nobody knew who I was, nobody cared. But there was a junior at my high school. His name was Rip, short for Richard, called him Rip. Starting fullback on the football team, had an awesome car, just this like really outgoing personality. Everybody loved this guy. And this guy became interested in one of my older sisters. Like, he had a crush on her. He wanted to ask her out, had no idea she was my older sister. Then eventually figured that out in a conversation that they were having. And my sister was a few years older than him. And Rip, instead of saying, oh, I have no chance of getting this girl to date me, thought, you know what? I should really take as many strategies as I can to try to, get this girl to be interested in me too. So one of his strategies was to be nice to me, the invisible, annoying little brother who was a sophomore in high school. So Rip kind of took me under his wing and kind of invited me into his group of friends, which was a very popular group of people. So I'm thrilled to death, right? I went from invisible to now all of a sudden, I have a group of friends. It was awesome. So one weekend evening, there were 10 of us, 9 juniors and 1 sophomore, 5 guys, 5 girls, and we all went to see a concert at a coffee shop. That's like a 90s thing that people don't really do that anymore, but we did back then. And then everybody went over to somebody's house. We were just hanging out, it's a weekend. I'm like, this is awesome, I have friends. Well, there were like couples that kind of started disappearing one by one. And it's like, oh, that was a couple, and they went off to some room or some part of the house and just disappearing. I'm like, what's happening? Where's everybody going? Oh, I see. It's like, couples going off, whatever. So it came down to this other girl who was a junior in high school and me, the unknown sophomore who was new to the crowd. And I'm thinking, okay, we're like the last 2 picked on the dodgeball team. Like, we're perfect for each other. So, she's the last one here. I'm the last one here. I'm going to make my move. So I tried to kiss her. And she was not interested in that at all. Now, most people in this situation would say, all right, you know what? You got a little eager, first time hanging out with the group, maybe jump the gun a little too fast. Let's just, let this thing settle and maybe down the road a couple months, you can talk about it. Not this guy. What this guy thought is, you know what? I need to take a different approach. So I started cracking some jokes, making fun of myself, making fun of the situation, lighten things up a little bit. After a while, I get her laughing. I'm like, okay, now she's interested in me. She sees my sense of humor. This is really gonna work. So I try to kiss her a second time. Nope, it's not happening. Now, most people, almost anybody with a brain in this situation would say, you know what? You've tried to kiss a girl twice. She has rejected you twice. It is time to move on, flip the page in the playbook and do something else, think about something else, just say I'm sorry and move on, but not me. In that moment, I thought, you know what? I'm pretty good with words. I can communicate to people, can be pretty persuasive. So I'm going to try to convince her. I'm going to try to make a solid argument to her as to why she should kiss me, why she should be into me and interested in me. I know you're already embarrassed, okay? But it just gets worse. So I spent a few minutes trying to talk her into kissing me back. And at some point along the way, I don't know why, I guess I was stupid. I felt like I was being persuasive enough that this thing was gonna work. And yes, I went in for kiss number 3. And at this point, this girl was no longer saying, no, I'm not interested, or I'm sorry, I'm just kind of really not my thing right now. She was very clear, using a lot of adjectives that were not nice, telling me basically to stay away from her. Okay, so all that's bad, but it gets worse. And at this point, 8 juniors in high school come around the corner. Everyone else that was in the group, see, a couple had come downstairs. I think somebody had a curfew, so they had to get home. They kind of are listening to what's happening. Everybody else comes down the stairs and they're like, so they kind of, sit in the foyer and just listen to this whole thing play out in the living room right around the time when I was trying to convince this girl for the 3rd time to kiss me. I try to kiss her. She says no for the 3rd time in a very mean way. 8 people come around the corner, dying laughing, looking at me. Oh yeah. And that moment me standing there with one very angry girl who was a junior in high school and 8 other juniors in high school who were part of the cool crowd that I had just found my way into because Rip was interested in my sister. They're all staring at me, laughing. That is my most embarrassing moment in high school, right? Okay, let that sink in for a second. Well, that night, the next day, probably for weeks and weeks, I was just obviously humiliated and just felt like, you know what? I'm never gonna be able to figure out this dating thing. There's never gonna be a time when it's gonna, I'm gonna be cool and it's gonna be smooth and like there's gonna be a girl who's interested in me. Once I'm interested in her, I'm gonna try to talk to a girl and she's gonna be, really won over by my personality. I just don't get it, okay? It's just not working out for me. Now, maybe you felt this way before about dating in general. It's like you feel like it's easy for anybody to get a date besides you. And you make jokes and you laugh it off, but if you're honest, you're like, man, ouch, that just stings a little bit. Or sometimes, even worse, you feel rejected. And yes, standing there in a living room with 9 juniors looking at me, I would say I felt a little rejected in that moment. And rejection in any context, it's just no walk in the park, is it? So in this series, we're talking about dating and this idea of being more than friends. And even if you don't use the word dating, use the word hanging out or some other word that I don't know about, statistics tell us that most high schoolers aren't in a relationship right now. And even if you've never been in a relationship or you're not in one right now, somehow doesn't dating or this idea or whatever word you use, doesn't it still feel like a big deal sometimes? Even though we laugh it off and shrug it off, doesn't it still feel like, man, it's this big, heavy, intense thing? It's because the idea of being more than friends brings a lot of emotions and feelings with it, right? And feelings are a powerful thing. In any situation, feelings are powerful. In fact, King Solomon wrote something that speaks to that. And he says, a cheerful heart is good medicine. Feeling cheerful in your heart, that's good medicine. But a crushed spirit, feeling down, feeling low, feeling depressed, it dries up the bones. And thinking back to this most embarrassing moment in high school, it was not just that it was embarrassing because people were around me, not just embarrassing because I tried to kiss a girl 3 times and she said no, it's pretty bad. It's because, it was my insecurity. It was my loneliness. It was this sense of feeling like, man, if I could get a girl to be interested in me, it would fix something in me. It would make me happy. It would take away this sense of me feeling like I just can't find anybody who's interested in dating me. It's like, oh, this is going to fix something. But Solomon says something different than that. He says that a cheerful heart is the cure. In other words, a sense of joy, that's the cure. That's the medicine to feeling down. That's the medicine to feeling insecure and lonely. He didn't say that the answer is found in perfect life circumstances or the answer is found in getting everything you want, including a dating relationship, including tons of girls who are just interested in you and everything you have to say. He says, no, it's a cheerful heart. And the second half of that verse goes on to say that a crushed spirit dries up the bones. And really what that means is like a broken spirit, it will weaken you. It wears you out. It's more than just, having a bad day or feeling bummed out, for a week or so. The word crushed is really like a way of life. Crushed captures it perfectly. It's this feeling of like, oh, I'm being weighed down. I'm weighed down by my unhappiness because of my life circumstances. Things are not going the way I want them to go, and I just feel like I have this crushed spirit. Now, whether you're feeling cheerful or crushed right now, I think what Solomon is saying is this: how you feel on the inside, it never really stays on the inside. It eventually works its way out into the rest of your life. And see, you've seen that before, you've felt that before. Some of you have noticed that your dating life or your lack of dating, it's affecting the way you feel about everything. So this sense of crushed spirit or feeling weighed down by the fact that, you've gone through a breakup or somebody you're interested in is not interested in you, it's starting to affect your mood and your relationships in every other area of your life. And you wish you had a cheerful heart. You're like, I want to get out of this, blue cloud. I want to feel better. But how? It's not like you can change how you feel about something. It's not like you can suddenly be thrilled that you're single or be thrilled that you can't get somebody to, ask you to prom or go to prom with you. It's not like you can not care that you just went through a breakup. And maybe you've heard people say things like, you know what, you just need to cheer up. You just need to change your attitude, come on, lift your head up. And you wondered, is that even something that human beings can actually do? Now, actually, there are a lot of verses in the Bible that show us that it is something that we can do. And I'm not saying that makes it easy. I'm just saying there's a lot of verses that talk about it. And over in different times, places, circumstances, different writers of scripture at different times and places to different contexts say things like rejoice or be glad or be of good cheer. And I imagine their original audience thought things like, oh, come on, man. It's like, is that even possible? How does somebody actually change how they feel? Hey, are you aware of my circumstances? They're not going very good. And one of the times we see this is in a letter from the Apostle Paul to the church at Philippi. And he says this, okay? He says, rejoice in the Lord always. I will say it again. This is not me. This is the Apostle Paul writing, I will say it again, rejoice. Another translation says, always be full of joy. See, Paul continues by reminding his readers of some things they can do to make that happen. He talks about treating people well, prayer, being grateful for all the good things they had. And then he says something that I think could be a game changer for you, especially if your life circumstances, especially the whole dating scene, has really bummed you out and left you feeling crushed. Paul says this, finally, brothers and sisters, that includes you, whatever is true, whatever is noble, whatever is right, whatever is pure, whatever is lovely, whatever is admirable, if anything is excellent or praiseworthy, think about such things. Basically, Paul is saying that what you think about matters. Like having a cheerful heart and not having a crushed spirit, they're both connected in your brain. They're both connected to what you think about and focus on. They're not simply affected by your life circumstances, like whether you're getting what you want or not in life, whether you're dating or you're single, it's not affected by that. It's affected by your mind and by your thoughts. And see, I think this is good news for you because it means that we have a lot more control than we think. It doesn't mean that it doesn't bother us if we're not dating or if our life circumstances aren't going the way we want. Stuff like that will always get to us, but we have the power to decide that it's not the only thing we'll think about. We have the power to decide that it doesn't have control over us, that we have more power and control than we think. Listen, anytime something frustrates you, it can be tempting to let it dominate your thoughts. And you've been there before. Somebody says something, somebody makes a comment, something, happens, and you just think about it over and over, replay. But before long, it can turn a bad moment into a bad mood. And then the bad mood, day after day, can lead to a bad life, which we call a crushed spirit. But it doesn't have to be that way. Just because one part of your life makes you unhappy, even if it's an important part, it doesn't mean all of your life is bad. So Paul is telling us just to make a change in the way we think. Why? Because when we don't change the way we think, we lose perspective. And a loss of perspective gives all the power to our circumstances. And before we know it, our circumstances have crushed our spirit. And see, when I think back to my embarrassing moment from high school, it wasn't just that the moment was embarrassing, it very much was. It was that for weeks afterwards, I just replay this terrible situation in my mind and replay these terrible thoughts in my mind about me, about who I was, my value, my future. And before long, I found myself pretty much with a crushed spirit because I lost my perspective. It was the only thing I thought I could think about, and it kept me from enjoying any other part of my life. And it's like I couldn't see any other part of my life clearly. You know when things change for me? When my circumstances change. But when I look back, I could have changed things so much faster if I had changed my perspective. And see, perspective is a weird word. We use it a lot, but somehow it's hard for us to define it to other people. Perspective is basically, it's what you see in a situation. But it doesn't just happen, you get to choose it. But to really illustrate this idea, let's do a little experiment with perspective, shall we? Now, I want you to put your hand just a few inches in front of your face. You can turn it this way, you can turn it that way. It's totally up to you. It could be like you're about to give a high five. Now, for just a second, I want you to focus your eyes on your fingers. See those beautiful fingers of yours. Now keep your focus there. Like, you can still see me up on the screen, right? But I probably look kind of blurry. Now keep your hand in front of your face, but look through your fingers and focus on me, okay? Right here. Focus through your fingers. Now you can see all of it up here, right? This screen and the things that are around this screen. See, what you just saw are two different ways of seeing the same situation. You know, you focus on your fingers, everything else looks blurry. You look through your fingers, and all of a sudden you can see clearly beyond that. It's just two ways of seeing the same situation. And that's a silly little illustration, but it's what I also want you to figure out when it comes to dating. Because dating, and whatever you call it, it will always be a big part of your world. The whole thing will always be right in front of your face in some way, shape, or form. But you can choose whether you focus on it or you focus beyond it. See, your perspective is your pick. Your perspective, it's your pick. The choice is yours. The choice is not your circumstances. The choice is not everybody else around you. The choice is yours. It's okay to want to date. It's even okay to be frustrated by the whole process and idea of dating, but it doesn't have to be the main thing you focus on. Okay, it doesn't have to be the thing that dominates your mind. When dating starts to consume you, when your life begins to revolve around your relationship status, when you feel like the deeper things going on in your life can be fixed by the right person, by the right girl, or by the right guy. When more important things in your life start to get blurry, when you lose perspective on your priorities, your family, the people closest to you, when things like that happen and they start to get blurry, it's time to step back. It's time to pick a new perspective. It's time to fight to have a cheerful heart by the things that you think about and focus on. See, you're not going to suddenly feel differently. Your feelings aren't entirely under your control, but your attention, your focus, and your view of the situation is. The thing that can be hard to remember as teenagers, and I've been there, is that this is just a season of a much bigger life. That story I told you at the beginning about my embarrassing moment, it just felt like it was my whole world. And for you guys, because this is the season you're in, it can feel difficult to see all of it clearly. Like not having a date could feel like the actual end of the world. Like being dumped could feel like the worst day of your life. Not getting a promposal or getting a no to your promposal feels humiliating. See, it's normal to be bummed out by stuff like that. But believe me, you will make it through. And the sooner you can make a decision to change your focus, the sooner you'll see those tough moments with the right perspective, not the wrong perspective. Because the truth is, no circumstance, dating or otherwise, is going to give you a cheerful heart that you want. It's not going to make you happy. And you're not stuck with a crushed spirit because things aren't going the way you want to in your dating life or any other part of your life. You can actually change your attitude. You can focus on something more important because there's so much going on in your world other than dating. Sometimes it just takes a little effort and some thought to remind yourself of that. So let's practice for a second, okay? Let's go back to what Paul wrote and take some cues from him, that we get our fuel for how to do this from Scripture. You don't have to answer out loud, but in your own mind. What is one thing going really well in your life right now? Like, okay, you can focus on all the bad, but if you were forced to talk about something that's going well, what would that be? Who is one person that you're grateful for? What's one talent that you're glad you have? What's one thing you're proud of yourself for? What's one thing God has done in your life or around you that makes you thankful? See, chances are you can't answer all of those right now. Some of them you're like, I don't know what to say about that. But I bet you have an answer to one or two of those things. There's some things that came to mind. And it just means some really good things are happening in your world right now. It's not all bad. It's not all negative. It's not all a crushed spirit. So in the words of the Apostle Paul, think about such things. Let your minds stay there. You can choose whether your mind goes there or to all the things going wrong. And it doesn't mean that you never have negative thoughts. It doesn't mean you never think about dating. It's just not your entire focus. And as your focus changes, you may find yourself feeling better about the dating scene because you put it in its proper place with proper perspective. And I want you to think about what you can do to proactively go after a cheerful heart even when you don't feel like it, even when your emotions say something different. Even if your circumstances when it comes to dating don't change in high school, think of how your life would look different if you had a cheerful heart. And think about what you could miss out on in your high school years if you didn't have a cheerful heart. See, that's bigger than dating. And as you get older, more and more things will happen in your life that have the potential to frustrate you or make you angry or disappoint you. But when things aren't necessarily the way you want, I want you to know that you have more power than you think you do. Your dating circumstances in life will change. Your life circumstances will change. You can't control that, but you can control how you respond. Why? Because your perspective, it's your pick. Take it from the wisest king to have ever lived. Your heart is too important to leave it in a broken and crushed place. But a simple change in where you focus can make all the difference in the world. And so what I want you to do is pick your perspective and fight to go after a cheerful heart.